Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Automotive Photography, Section 7, Understanding Adobe Photoshop. Now, I just have to say right off the bat that just like many other Adobe products, Adobe Photoshop can look incredibly intimidating if you've never used this software before. And truthfully, I am nowhere close to being a Photoshop expert. This section is not going to be nearly as in-depth as the Lightroom section. I am not going to go through every single tool in Photoshop, as I don't think every single tool in Photoshop is applicable to you guys as car photographers. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna show you the 3 tools that I use the most in Photoshop, as well as giving you a small tutorial on how to use sky replacement. Keep in mind that just like my Lightroom is broken, my Photoshop is also broken, meaning my sky replacement doesn't work right now. This means I may split up the sky replacement tutorial in a separate video contained within this section. With that being said, let's jump into Photoshop. So first things first, you are going to find yourself on this opening screen here, and let's go ahead and use the photo that we edited from the Lightroom tutorial. You're going to go ahead and hit open. This opens up my file explorer. As you can see, we are in desktop Lightroom edits. This is where I save all of my Lightroom edits. Again, everything is labeled by date, so if I want to go to the photo that we did, all I have to do is scroll directly to the bottom. I have a few photos in here that don't have dates on them that I haven't moved out of this folder. Just ignore that. So you're going to click on the file. Again, we're going to click UBGAP example 1 and hit open. This is going to pull up your photo on screen. Now, the first tool that I am going to show you how to use in Photoshop is called the spot healing brush. Direct your attention over to the left side of the screen, and it is going to be the icon that looks like a band-aid. Go ahead and click that, and you will notice that this circle icon is now showing up as your cursor. Just like the heal tool that I demonstrated in Lightroom, this tool works the same way. Go ahead and find unwanted objects in your photo, like these rocks on the ground, for example, and you can make very quick, simple selections to get them out of the shot. Again, you can also use the bracket keys on your keyboard to make the brush smaller, or you can come up here and change the brush size, hardness, and spacing up here as well. This tool works great for small little objects like we are seeing, but unfortunately, when you have foreground, like this gravel, for example, that's got a lot of detail in it towards the car, as you start getting rid of some of these objects, you'll notice that it looks a little bit funky in some circumstances. These ones appear to be doing pretty okay, but again, if you zoom in really closely, you can notice that it's a little bit spotty. So if this happens to you, one of the other tricks that you can use is grabbing this lasso tool. It is the third icon from the top, and it looks just like a lasso. You go ahead and click that and go over the spot that you adjusted earlier and draw around it. Once you let go of your cursor, you will notice that it creates this dotted line selection. You're then able to go up to Edit and go to where it says Fill. Go ahead and set the opacity to 100 and the contents to Content Aware. What this does is Photoshop uses its AI to detect what is around that spot you're looking to remove in order to fill that. Again, Lightroom now has kind of combined the lasso tool and the heal tool for purposes of spot removal into the same thing, but in Photoshop, it's 2 separate tools. Again, as far as when you're going to use either the lasso tool or the spot healing brush to remove items in your photo is entirely up to your own discretion. What I have noticed throughout my career is sometimes one will work better than the other, so you're kind of just gonna have to play around between the two to figure out what works best for your specific scenario. But hold on, let's say that you've used the spot healing brush and the lasso tool with content aware fill to get something out of your photo and it's still not working. You do have one other option, and that is called the clone stamp tool. Represented by the stamp on the left-hand side of the screen here, go ahead and click that, and you will once again notice that you have a circle on your screen. However, what this tool allows you to do is when you hold the Alt key, it allows you to select which part of the photo you would like to use as your paintbrush, so to speak. So while holding Alt, you click on this side of the gravel, for example, and when you go to paint over here, instead of AI using its own selection to figure out what to fill there, it will actually grab a whole other part of the photo and use that to fill that area. The clone stamp tool obviously can help you get rid of small objects in your photos, but it can obviously be much more useful than that as well. Let's say if you had a photo with a garbage can parked in front of a white picket fence. As long as there was enough of that white picket fence in the photo for you to clone stamp, you could actually just clone stamp over where the trash can was with a different piece of the fence, getting rid of the trash can completely. I know that's a little bit of a difficult example to make without a literal trash can in my photo somewhere, but I hope you guys can understand what I'm trying to say. The point is, with the clone stamp tool, the spot healing brush, and the lasso tool combined with content aware fill, you can pretty much get anything out of your photos that you could possibly think of. One other quick cool use of the lasso tool, if you click the lasso tool, you'll notice that there's this button towards the top that says select and mask. If you click that button and select subject, sometimes Photoshop will actually select your subject for you to perfection. Now in this case, it obviously grabbed a little bit extra, so you can go ahead and come to the left-hand side over to the eraser tool and actually get rid of what it selected that you didn't want actually selected. However, it's worth mentioning that if you're shooting a photo against a solid background, 9 times out of 10, Photoshop is going to be able to figure out what the subject is and select it for you. So those are the 3 tools that I use the most inside of Photoshop. Like I said, Photoshop is an incredibly powerful program that you can use to do all kinds of crazy things. But as far as what I'm going to recommend to you as a beginning photographer, I would highly recommend that you utilize this program mostly just to remove unwanted objects from your photos. And with that subject select tool, you could even potentially use it to remove photos from your background, putting it up against a different background that's maybe more appealing. However, before we conclude this Photoshop section, there is one other thing I'd like to show you, and that is sky replacement. Now, like I said, my Photoshop is broken and this feature hasn't been working, but I'm at least gonna walk you through how you get it started. So very simply, you'll come up here into the Edit tab and you will bring your cursor down to where it says Sky Replacement. It is literally that easy. You click Sky Replacement, and if the AI is working properly, it will select your sky and then replace it with any of these skies in the folders in this menu. Like I said, mine isn't working, so it's not letting me access the menu, but you have a few different folders to choose from, including blue skies, sunsets, vivid skies, and I believe they also have storm skies as well. But these are far from the only skies that you are able to use. You are of course able to import your own photos containing the sky and then use those for your sky replacements. But if you're just starting out, the skies that Photoshop has preloaded into the software will be more than enough for you to play around and have a ton of fun. One thing I would like to mention though, if you're planning on doing sky replacement for a whole set, make sure you are utilizing this flip section right here. What that does is essentially flips the sky in the opposite direction, so if you're taking photos from multiple angles, you don't always want the clouds to line up. Therefore, clicking that flip tool is very helpful. Also, one last thing that I usually do once the sky is actually imported on there, I clearly don't have one, so I'm just going to draw a white square. Okay, so when you do sky replacement, you're gonna see in the bottom right-hand corner that there are a bunch of different layers related to the sky. What I will normally do is select the sky layer. Again, here it's just gonna show rectangle, but on your screen, if your Photoshop is working correctly, you will see several options, one of which just says sky. You click that, you go up to the image tab, go into adjustments, and you can click this hue and saturation setting. What this allows you to do is change the brightness, the hue, and the saturation of your sky. This is incredibly important because a lot of times the preloaded skies aren't going to match the colors and white balance of your original edited photo. So you'll have to play around with the hue in the hue and saturation setting to get it to match colors perfectly, and then you could play with the brightness to decide how much detail do you want from the sky showing through. Once you're done with a photo in Photoshop, you can go ahead and go up to File, go to Export, Export As. Here you'll get the ability to either save it as a JPEG, a PNG, or a GIF. I would just leave it as a JPG or JPEG, not sure why I said it like that. And then here you have a slider to determine how large you would like your file size to be, aka how high quality do you want your photo to be. Here you have all your image dimensions. If you imported your photo from Lightroom, I would just leave these all alone as they will match the original export that you had from Lightroom. From there you click export. It should carry over the file name that you used from Lightroom. And at this point you can either give it a unique name given that it has now been photoshopped, or you can just overwrite your original file from Lightroom, which is what I do. And just like that, you're all done. Now granted, I would like to mention that if I was editing this photo in its entirety, I would probably remove these telephone poles in the background, as well as all of these different objects that are coming out of the top of the car. So good rule of thumb for looking for things to remove from the photo, any rocks or litter or anything like that on the ground are always good objects for you to remove, as well as any items sticking out from behind the car you're taking photos of. One last thing I would like to mention before we conclude this section is don't let your editing knowledge and abilities turn you into a lazy photographer on site. What I mean by that is don't go into a shoot seeing stuff on the ground, seeing things popping up from behind the car, and just say, oh, I can get that out later, it's no big deal. One, chances are when you actually get onto your computer, you're gonna be really upset that you were that lazy on site. Two, like I mentioned before, not every spot removal is going to go 100% perfectly. So the best thing to do is to set up your shots on site as perfectly as you possibly can to give yourself the lowest amount of work possible when you're editing the photos. Again, I understand that sometimes we're gonna do crazy editing projects where we want to spend a lot of times on them, but ultimately you want the basic foundation of your image to be as clean as possible. So don't let stuff stick up from behind the car, don't let there be trash and litter all over the ground. And this is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek suggestion, but if the car you're photographing has a front license plate, throw it in the garbage. All jokes aside, just make sure that your shot and setting is clean while you're at the actual location so that you don't have to spend hours removing items from your photos. So that's gonna do it for section 7, understanding Photoshop. I hope you guys learned a lot here. Again, I don't use Photoshop a ton for my car photos. There are just a few things here and there where if my photo's not absolutely perfect, I can use Photoshop's features to do what I want. Anyways, thank you so much for getting through another section of the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Automotive Photography. Let's go ahead and jump into section 8, car photography as a business.